Now, some of you watching right now might think that this is a good change, that YouTube should censor alt-right personalities and similar controversial YouTubers. What you need to understand is that this censorship is far from limited to controversial YouTubers. While I do understand that suicide prevention videos shouldn't be monetized, do you think that any of the videos I just mentioned should be censored? And when less people get help, more people commit suicide.
We do not intend to address our personal opinions or emotions regarding what constitutes worthy content. We will be making the assumption in this video that free speech does not equal the right to be heard, regardless of how inspiring, educational, or conversely, potentially damaging such a message may be. This is a crucial distinction in experimental design, as will become apparent later on. We will be defining censorship within a YouTube context as YouTube preventing a user who has a legitimate interest in particular content from gaining access to that content. Illegitimate interests in content per our definition would include criminal content or age-restricted adult content when the viewer is a minor. We note that age-restricted content is to be distinguished from restricted mode content. The former requires that a user be signed in with a verified age of 18 or older, while the latter indicates mature content that can be hidden from view by the device owner by voluntarily selecting a setting.
Imagine going to the movies and you're not sure what you want to see yet. You're still deciding. You're looking at the marquee, you're looking at the showtimes on the board, and there's no ratings next to the titles. And not only that, but every movie that was rated R is gone. It's hidden. Or
we regard gross box office ticket sales as a relatively reliable indicator of audience appetite. While ticket prices may vary based on the location of the theater, or discounts may be given if the movie is outside of a certain period after its release, or for pensioners or children, or based on periods where demand is lower, for example morning shows midweek out of season, ticket prices are not generally affected by the specific title or the rating of the film. We inspected a list of the highest grossing films of all time. Avengers Endgame, at number 1, grossed $2.8 billion, while Avengers The Age of Ultron, at number 10, grossed $1.4 billion. At number 25, Transformers Dark Side of the Moon grossed $1.1 billion in box office earnings. At number 50, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 1, grossed $960 million. We then considered the highest grossing R-rated films of all time. We should add here that R-rated films are not the same thing as adult films, also known as NC-17 films. Instead, they feature mature content similar to what one would expect in YouTube's restricted mode. At number 1, we have Deadpool 2, grossing $785 million. That is to say, the number 1 R-rated film of all times earned $175 million less than the 50th rated film of all time, and $2 billion less than the highest grossing film of all time. In short, when it comes to earnings potential, the rating matters.
That's the current state of YouTube. There is a secret rating system that is assigned to every video uploaded and every channel as a whole. Very similar to the MPA ratings. It goes from G to mature. You can't see it as a user. You can't see it or appeal it as a content creator. And it's censoring the website.
It appears that in that much, City and Sealow would agree with us. However, contrary to their perception, it is not just the rating in and of itself that affects performance. Avengers Endgame earned 3.5 times more than Deadpool 2. The Lion King, grossing $1.6 billion, earned more than double what Deadpool 2 did, while Frozen, grossing almost $1.3 billion, outperformed Deadpool 2 at the box office almost 2-to-1. Since we did not consider income from streaming services, DVD sales, or merchandising, this indicates that the market appetite for family-type content could be triple the demand for mature content.
So we used YouTube's official data API to get related videos for over 60,000 videos, totaling 800,000 videos scraped. We use 6 different accounts over a 5-day period. Now by default, safe search is set to moderate. We have explicitly set that variable to none, and all of the accounts are over the age of 25. There should not be any content restrictions at all.
In order to prove that YouTube is actively censoring content, one would need to prove that they are significantly suppressing recommendations based on a user's personal watch and search history, either in the up next, but more so in search. However, personal watch and search history did not apply to Sealow's experiment, since although they harvested their data from 6 accounts for users over the age of 25, they then excluded all the personal recommendations from the related videos as part of the experimental design methodology, meaning that it is not a like-for-like comparison, as the age of the user should not be a factor in purely market-based recommendations. Alternatively, in order to prove censorship by YouTube, one would need to prove that they are basing their non-personal recommendations on non-market factors through a content push inventory model or a supply economy model, and that doing so is not for some legitimate purpose, such as to comply with legal obligations or restrictions for a localized version. A significant percentage of viewers may not be signed into any account. It makes sense that YouTube would be more reluctant to serve potentially age-inappropriate content to such users if the device does not contain any watch or search history upon which to base personal recommendations for mature content. Sealow's analysis fails to account for the total market demographic composition and fails to take into account that there may have been changes to YouTube's audience demographics. While YouTube's original audience are highly likely to have valued counterculture and are thus expected to have had a high appetite for mature content, as its market penetration grew, its audience composition would naturally become generic in comparison to the total population, and audience appetite for mature content would be expected to resemble trends observed in box office earnings much more closely. Sealow's experimental design assumed that adults have neutral content rating preferences, or put differently, that the market of over 25 YouTube users have an appetite for mature content that is proportional to the percentage of the mature content uploaded to YouTube by content creators. This would clearly not be a logical assumption from a marketing perspective, as a not insignificant proportion of the market of over 25 consumers would be listening to content while there are minors present, while others are expected to be consuming content at corporate institutions like their work, and not safe for work content is likely to be frowned upon in those environments, if not outright blocked by network administrators. The experiment fails to account for cultural, religious, and even gender preferences when it comes to the aggregate market consumption of mature content.
Now, as a way to explain this, when YouTube decide which videos get recommended, they account for views, comments, and likes. Now, if YouTube doesn't account for monetization status, then there would not be any visible pattern.
Sealow's methodology excluded recommendations in the up next specifically recommended for that specific user, thus claiming the only drivers for the remaining recommendations are based on views, comments, and likes. It fails to consider that the observed relationship could very well be indicative of the proportionate size of the various submarkets in relation to the total content market. Views from users who are logged out, or who never signed up for an account in the first place, or who are under the age of 18, or who are adults that simply do not like mature content, will still count towards the aggregate view data for the total YouTube content economy, which may skew the total content market towards more family-friendly content, even without intervention from YouTube to manage their reputational risk. It is possible that YouTube does not need a sandbagging function in order to prevent mature content from showing up in market-based recommendations for signed-in users over the age of 25. This appears to be corroborated by the audience appetite for various film ratings, as we discussed.
If you take the related videos for videos that are demonetized and then arrange them by the total amount of views, with the lowest to the left and the highest to the right, and then count the cumulative percentage of demonetized videos, you get the following pattern. First off, there should not be any pattern at all for the demonetized videos. It should simply be at random, unless YouTube is actively censoring demonetized videos.
Sealow's proof that YouTube is actively censoring videos is based on his assumption that there ought not to be any discernible relationship between the independent variable of total cumulative views and the dependent variable of total cumulative percentage of demonetized videos. He claims that the only viable explanation must be that YouTube censors videos, either based on monetization status or based on the same set of criteria, namely whether the content is appropriate for wider audiences. This is simply not true. His expectations inherently assume that views are a function of impressions, rather than that impressions are a function of views. His experimental design thus assumes a supply-driven content economy, instead of a demand-driven economy which we would expect in a digital landscape. Sealow's expected relationships are based on an inventory push model, while we have every reason to deduce that YouTube uses an inventory pull model.
Community. Regular people don't have a crystal ball about what metadata to use for a video, so not every video related to Me Too used that hashtag, and they won't in the future, not if you don't tell people. YouTube is in a tough position. Whatever they do, they're gonna get slammed, and on tricky topics. In lots of cases, depending who they side with determines who's gonna try to sue them. One theory.
On a brief side note, movie ratings also don't always appear to make sense. For example, Gladiator, which grossed approximately $460 million, has an R rating, as does Troy, which grossed around $480 million. Both of these show violence in a historical context, and neither movie consists entirely of battle scenes. The Avengers series, however, do not have R ratings, despite battles that are arguably as graphic and despite most being set in a modern-day context. It has been reported that the MPAA have been criticized for not making rating standards public, and the documentary, This Film Has Not Yet Been Rated, reportedly claims that the association does not tell the filmmaker which scenes need adjustment in order to receive a more desired rating. This appears to be similar to the criticisms creators like Nerd City, Sealow, and YouTube Analyzed, as well as others, are making in reference to YouTube. It is possible that if YouTube, like other streaming services are reported to do, make use of the TV Parental Guidelines Monitoring Board standards created with input from the MPAA, that they are contractually prohibited from making detailed standards public. It is possible that this may be a broadcasting industry problem, rather than a YouTube-specific problem, even if YouTube did not have an interest in keeping thresholds confidential to deter gaming of their systems. We source the statistics regarding gross film income, rating descriptors and systems, etc. from Wikipedia unless otherwise stated. While we would normally defer to the primary sources, we deem them an appropriate source for aggregate entertainment-related data for our purely illustrative purposes. At the time of recording, to the best of our knowledge, we do not have any current or prior affiliation with any of the third parties referred to in this video.